Frank, I'm really happy you're here today at Cunningham Piano. I just wanted to discuss with you a minute and ask you a couple of questions. And thank you so much. We did ask a few things of you in the new Cunningham Piano, and you delivered, man. There's no question about it. Thank you for basing the scale and the design of the plate on the original Cunningham. We've had Philadelphia musicians who are so pleased with that. Just even the visual aspect, forget about design, but I know the design is there too. We were looking for a few things in this piano. One was stability. How were you able to achieve that through design? Because you certainly did.
Well, a lot of that has to do with the bracing of the rim. And most people think of the braces as supporting the string tension from the bottom side. But the most vulnerable part of the soundboard in sustaining its crown is the belly rail. And the bracing, and particularly the highest brace that in many pianos, that's the first brace to be excluded.
Right.
But that's one of the most critical braces because that supports the belly rail. In this area that is most vulnerable to losing crown, and a lot of technicians call it the kill rock because you lose crown in this area and you just can't get it back. You lose power of the attack and the sustain. So this brace is very critical.
And that is a massive brace, more massive than I've seen in a lot of pianos.
And it's also perpendicular to the belly rail because that's what we want to support. It's not at an angle that weakens the support of the belly rail. And there's also, this also gives us an opportunity to place a nose bolt in the plate in that location to support the plate better. And of course there's nose bolts through the rim into the plate corresponding to each of the braces. So that ties in the strength of the bottom structure with the top to give the more stability to the entire string scale.
Another thing that frustrated us, which you, again, I think you delivered beautifully, is in a smaller size piano, we happen to be standing at the 5'4", which has been a really popular seller for us. That whole section, when you're going from treble bridge to bass bridge, from treble strings to bass strings, the break in pianos this size is oftentimes very evident. And you worked with that beautifully. Can you tell us how you did that?
Well, the thinking for so many years about the break is that we have so many changes occurring at the same time. We're changing from plain wires to rep strings, from trichords to bichords. We're at the end of one bridge going to another bridge. So many things happen at that one spot, it's destined to have problems in voicing and getting it to sound transparent across the break. A lot of the early thinking was, well, if we just make some of those changes, a few notes this way or that,
right,
and put some wound strings on the treble bridge so that, and bichords on the treble bridge, then those are two changes that will happen at the same place.
I see. So sort of ease it up and we won't notice.
Right.
Yeah.
But it didn't work.
Right.
Because when you put a plain wire and
I'm actually thinking, excuse me, I'm actually thinking of scales that we've rebuilt where those are some of the worst breaks that do that. Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
The problem with that is when you have a wound string unison on the same bridge right next to a plain wire unison, then one of the other is going to be too long or too short or both, because the wound string is so much heavier necessarily than its neighbor that it needs to be significantly shorter. So from a rebuilding point of view, an option is to put in a transition bridge for the wound strings that would otherwise be on the treble bridge. But from a design point of view, it's simpler and makes more sense to me to just put more of those notes on the bass bridge. So we just move the break up to get all of the wound strings on the bass bridge. And it turns out that because we can get a more idealized tension, even though we brought those two changes back to the same spot, it makes a better transition in the end.
And that did require you to change the design of the soundboard, the design of the bridges and their placement, the design of the scale itself, didn't it?
And the placement of the ribs on the bottom to balance that and to support the crown that would be necessary. Another important thing in the bass section, a requirement of the bass strings is that you need more flexibility to respond to the lower frequency. You need more stiffness in the treble to respond to the higher frequencies. The problem that so often occurs in the bass bridge is that we wind up with a tiny, tiny little tail length. Because the Ideally, for a piano of a given size, on the comparison charts that you see for marketing different pianos, they like to compare their piano with others. And one of the points of comparison is always the length of note number one.
Right.
And the implication is
How long is the lowest bass note's string?
Right.
Right.
And the longer the better, right? Wrong.
Right.
If it's done at the expense of the tail length, that adds too much stiffness to the entire structure.
It also brings the bass bridge out to the rim closer, which means it's not going to have as free a vibration as well, right?
Right. So, you should never maximize the speaking length at the expense of the tail length. So, you'll have a better sounding piano if you compromise the speaking length a little bit to have an adequate tail length. And that's true of the low end of the treble as well as the low end of the bass bridge.
Right. Well, I have to tell you, Tim Oliver and I have both been admirers of your work for years. I know you were with Mason Hamlin a long time, you were with Baldwin a long time, you worked for a variety of people. We are so happy to have this collaboration the way it's happened, and we're so pleased with the final product. And you took some trash from us when we looked at that prototype plate. And I know that you wound up changing the scale to accommodate it, so I thank you for having that flexibility. We felt like this has been a very coherent collaboration, and we really appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
All right.